number of dead and wounded in the Middle East conflict rises, reports indicate that the region is facing its worst moment yet. In Brazil, G20 leaders agree on final declaration focusing on climate change, hunger, and condemnation of wars and terrorism. The International Organization for Migration denounces that the increased violence between criminal groups has generated massive displacement of some 20,000 people in the last 4 days in Haiti. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. As the number of dead and wounded in the Middle East conflict rises, reports indicate that the region is facing its worst moment yet. To date, in Lebanon, at least 3,516 people have been killed and 14,929 wounded in Israeli attacks. Meanwhile, at least 43,922 Palestinians have been killed and 103,898 wounded as part of Israel's genocide in Gaza since October 7, 2023. According to the UN's Middle East envoy, the current conditions in Gaza are among the worst they've seen in the entire war. In addition to noticing the whole region is at a grim crossroads. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to continue systematic operations against Hezbollah even if a ceasefire agreement is reached. The United States supports the Israeli genocide offensive against Palestine, including the 45th-day siege on Gaza Strip, preventing humanitarian aid to enter, and the ongoing shellings on residential buildings. Zionist bombs are even usual on refugee camps, devastating all Palestine, which current harsh climate made the crisis more catastrophic. In this context, the local resistance has been fighting off Israeli strikes, having reported casualties and wounded in the latest hours. Meanwhile, the death of children and women under the rubble go on a rise due to Israeli shellings on buildings. Those organizations describe as desperate the humanitarian situation in view of the prolonged Israeli siege and war. At least 2 people were killed and several wounded after Israeli forces bombed southern Lebanon. According to the Lebanese National News Agency, 2 people were killed and several injured overnight as Israeli forces continued to bomb the southern governorate of Nabatieh al-Fawqa as well as Kfar Raman. The agency also reported that Israeli strikes hit near the Nabi Berri Government University Hospital in the city of Nabatieh. Homes in the towns of Ansariyeh and Beit Jibril were also targeted. A U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Amos Hochstein, landed on Tuesday in Beirut, where preliminary talks on a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon are expected to set off. In addition, spokesperson of the U.S. State Department, Matthew Miller, assured that both Beirut and Tel Aviv would have reacted positively to the efforts mediated by France. The conditions for the ceasefire did not transcend, but it was known that Hezbollah knew the terms, as was the case with the failed truce attempts in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu granted on Monday that even if the efforts were successful, he would continue to attack Hezbollah to prevent its reconstruction. And several missiles of the Hezbollah Lebanese resistance directly have counterattacked Tel Aviv after the Israeli shellings on the suburbs of Beirut. The Israeli occupying police detailed that one of the missiles crashed into a building in Ramat Gan, causing damage and injuries. Official reports revealed that the strikes made the power grid to be cut off in certain areas of Tel Aviv and the Ben Gurion airport, leaving the city without connections. 6 firefighting teams have been mobilized to extinguish the fires burst out by the impacts. Hours earlier, an Israeli raid in Beirut neighborhood left at least 10 deaths and 25 injured. And on Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved the updated nuclear doctrine. According to the document, the nuclear deterrence is defensive in nature. The new doctrine significantly broadens the type of threats to which Moscow will respond and aims to improve state policy in the area of nuclear deterrence. The document reiterates that the use of nuclear weapons is an extreme measure. The doctrine aims at ensuring the security of sovereignty and territorial integrity, incorporate the changes that were endorsed by President Putin on Tuesday amid discussions by some members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization on whether or not to allow Ukraine to attack deep Russian territory with its missiles. And Russian forces operating in Syria established 9 observation points on the line of separation in the occupied Syrian Golan. Russian Forces Deputy Commander Alexander Rodionov stated that the mission is to conduct air and ground surveillance. The Syrian Arab Army explained the deployment of Russian military police units improves stability and security in the territory. Rodionov also clarified that the cooperation and coordination between the Syrian Arab Army and the Russian forces strengthen security in the region and help people return to their lands and their daily life. And Donald Trump, President-elect of the United States, threatens to use a state of emergency and the military to expel migrants. Tom Fitton, leader of an extreme right-wing movement known as Judicial Watch, assured in a message that was later endorsed by the President-elect himself that as of January 2025, the White House will use the military to pursue its policies of mass deportations of migrants. To this end, the entrepreneur elected as president will decree a state of emergency as provided for in the country's constitutional framework, prior to the national deployment of military contingents. And the U.S. National Weather Service reported that the Northwest region prepares for the arrival of a storm that is expected to bring heavy rains and flooding. The agency warned that the storm could be long-lasting. Therefore, it urged the public to be prepared and comply with the recommended measures. California is the most vulnerable state. An alert was issued as flash flooding, power outages, and natural damage are expected when the storm reaches maximum intensity. Some areas in the northwestern part of the country could be targeted by the effects of the cyclone with possible landslides and rock slides. We now have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Brazil, G20 leaders agree on final declaration focusing on climate change, hunger, and condemnation of wars and terrorism. The 19 heads of state signed the document with ground agreements on issues such as climate change, hunger, and taxes on large fortunes. Likewise, and in line with the United Nations Charter, they condemn wars and terrorism, stressing that all states must refrain from the use of force against the sovereignty of others. The United States and the European Union pushed to include a condemnation of Russia, which did not went further. However, it does allude to the human suffering and negative impacts of the conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon.
The G20 Summit, a group that brings together the 19 main economies of the world, the European Union and the African Union, started this Monday in Rio de Janeiro. 55 delegations and representatives from 40 countries, including guests, are participating in the meeting. The meeting is closed to the public, who on the other side of the street watched the arrival of the leaders and sent them a message.
The United States is present in countries waging war, massacring peoples, and plundering wealth.
At the opening of the meeting, Brazilian President Lula da Silva launched the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty with 148 adherents, 82 countries in all. The goal of the partnership is to benefit 500 million people in the poorest countries through public policies for income distribution by 2030. The Inter-American Development Bank announced a donation of $25 billion. At the last minute, the president of Argentina decided to sign the pact and managed to be in the photo of the Global Alliance.
Although he announced that he was not going to sign, the president of Argentina signed the Global Pact Against Hunger. This is a first positive sign from this president of adherence to the global pact, and now we will see how the Mercosur will be.
Agora vamos ver como fica o Mercosul.
The meeting in Rio de Janeiro is being held under the theme, Building a Just World and a Sustainable Planet. But the G20 countries account for 85% of the gross domestic product and are the biggest polluters on the planet. For Lula da Silva,
taxar a los super ricos es fundamental para buscar los recursos para enfrentar los grandes.
it is essential to tame the super rich in order to find the resources to face the major global problems.
Y al Consejo de Seguridad de la ONU.
From Iraq to Ukraine, from Bosnia to Gaza, the perception that not all territories deserve to have their integrity respected and not all lives have the same value has been consolidated. Disastrous interventions to subvert order in Afghanistan and Libya, indifference has relegated Sudan and Haiti to oblivion.
The summit will end this Tuesday after a series of activities that began a year ago. In the midst of wars, genocide, climate crisis, what consensus will emerge among the world's richest countries?
André Vieira y Sebastián Soto, teleSUR, Brasil.
In this context, the French President Emmanuel Macron sharply criticized a global governance that does not work out and issues communiques that not many people read. Thus, he proposed a high-level group to work on the revisions.
This system is not working well, and I say that to be polite and understated, because in recent years we haven't shown our ability to prevent or resolve conflicts. As we speak, there are 57 conflicts around the world. Our effectiveness is insufficient, and our representation is lacking. The risk is high. Unfortunately, I am one of the veterans at this table. The risk is high of having the same meeting in a year, with the same people saying, "We're going to do it," and becoming specialists in, "We're going to do it." So if you are fully aligned, I think we should set up a high-level working group, a Rio Johannesburg working group.
In this context, Colombian Foreign Minister Luis Gilberto Murillo and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov agreed on creating a working group to investigate mercenaries involved in the Ukrainian conflict. On the meeting, their representatives decided to form a team to review the cases. Murillo deemed that although the participation of these citizens in the conflict is an autonomous decision, it's a matter of interest of the executives. So the Colombian minister recalled the parliament is currently debating on passing a treaty of accession to regulate and ban mercenaries practices, while Lavrov highlighted that Ukraine paid them off $3,000 a month to lead the mission. Cuba's National Defense Council, led by President Miguel Diaz-Canel, discussed the domestic recovery following powerful hurricanes and earthquakes. The Minister of Energy and Mines, Vicente de la O Levy, reported that Havana has 99.99% of power service, and the most affected provinces such as Artemisa and Mayabeque have 51.6% and 97.71% power, respectively. Authorities added that water supply has been fully restored in Mayabeque. In Artemisa, 74% of the province has water supply services. The chief of the National General Staff of the Civil Defense registered the progress in Granma, hit by two 6.0 and 6.7 earthquakes. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In response to the escalation of armed violence, the Haitian government opened a new military base to garrison around 2,000 soldiers in Port-au-Prince. The event was held within the celebration of the 221st anniversary of the Battle of Berthier. On his opening address, the President of the Transition Council, Leslie Voltaire, underscored that the current crisis of violence poses a very serious threat, noting that the military base is paramount to re-establish national security, paving the way for the direction. Voltaire promised to train at least 2,500 new recruits in the next couple of months to counteract the fact that armed criminal groups have gained ground on the government in the capital. And in the International Organization for Migration announced that the wave of violence triggered by criminal groups generated some 20,000 displaced in last 4 days in Haiti. In this context, the agency claimed that the crisis has disrupted essential supply chains and left the city totally isolated, while many of Haitians have repeatedly been forced to flee from violence. Over 17,000 citizens who had shelter in 15 displacement sites were compelled to leave what they had managed to rebuild. IOM pointed out that violence related to clashes between criminal groups has left a death toll of nearly 4,000 in 2024, and according to data from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. On the other hand, the United Nations Humanitarian Air Service announced that food aid flights to Haiti will resume their routes after a week-long suspension of flights. The agency made a regulatory pause after 3 commercial airplanes were hit by gunfire from local criminal groups, and the suspension was decreed. The measure, according to human rights organizations, further condemns smothering the Port-au-Prince population as they are dealing with the violence of criminal groups armed with weapons and ammunition coming from the United States. And on the first debate, the Colombian House of Representatives voted by absolute majority in favor of the health reform presented by the government of President Gustavo Petro. The bill received 14 votes in favor and 4 ballots against. The regulation, made up of 58 articles, seeks to twist an exclusive and inequitable health system. Therefore, in the first 4 sessions of the first discussion, it gained a lot of acceptance as 6 new articles had been passed to the 58 initial articles of the reform. After going through the first stage, the proposal will advance to the second debate, which will be held in the Chamber's plenary. The Minister of Health praised the significant support of the majority of political sectors. And in Colombia as well, a Spanish communications company consolidates its power in the sector, a situation rejected by the country's Central Workers Union.
Diego is one of more than 30 workers of Channel 1, CMI news program, who were laid off after the acquisition of that television space by the Spanish communications company Prisa. In addition to Diego, more than 180 workers have been left at risk in what constitutes the largest action of massive layoffs resulting from this transaction between the concessionaire that operates Channel 1 and the Spanish company, to whom the entire control of the programming grid, contents, and commercial exploitation was handed over, where the workers were not taken into account, leaving many of them adrift.
They should have also thought about the people who work there, the families, the households. There were more or less 130 of us from CMI. We are in the diverse, because there are people who could have come out of this situation better, but others who could not, as in my case. There are those of us who do not have a job at the moment, and we have to see what we will do, to see what solution they give us. But unfortunately, when they make these changes, these contributions, the giant companies do not look at the employee. They do not look at the employee's welfare as such. They care about closing the business. They have their share. They liquidate. The other people do not matter to them. They do not care about those people.
The Central Workers Union rejected the layoffs following this operation, in which CMI had 32 years of experience. A formal company on which nearly 100 direct jobs depended and whose contents are now replaced by the contents of Caracol Radio, a subsidiary of the Prisa Group in the country.
There should have been an issue of change of employer, and therefore of employer substitution. But no, here, the workers are nowhere to be seen by the gentlemen of Caracol Prisa.
But these are not the only irregularities. According to the same Workers' Unitary Central and some congressmen, the space occupied by CMI is of public character, which now cannot be exploited and used by a private without prior bidding, which constitutes a violation of the law and which gives rise to the formation of a monopoly of some sectors of communication, which represents a violation of national sovereignty.
It is pertinent to ask what happened, how the deal was agreed and how it was structured, since it is an absolutely legal fact and it should be explained why the Haste Group arrived with altruistic kindness to save the channel with serious economic difficulties in a process plagued with opacity in which nothing more and nothing less than the privatization of a public channel through the back door is at stake, and also without knowing in exchange for what.
In view of these irregular situations, the Minister of Technologies, Information and Communications, Mauricio Lizcano, will be called to a political control debate in the Congress of the Republic in order to explain to the country why he did not make the proper intervention and control of this operation on public media in the hands of a private company, which increases the monopoly of the media in the hands of economic conglomerates in the country.
Hernán Darío Tobar Gaitán, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
While in France, a nighttime exhibition with illuminated dinosaur figures has been inaugurated at the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. This recreational light show was designed by scientists and aims to showcase the diversity of the Jurassic world through various animated exhibits. The show has several specimens well known to the general public, as well as a large number of unknown plants and animals that are presented to encourage visitors to admire and learn about them. Each element has explanatory signs and posters with information about each of the species, as well as provides data about their way of life and the role they play in the ecosystem. The exhibition will be open to the public until January 19, 2025. At this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.